Hey everyone, this is Matt and Alice, and today we are going to be watching a philosophy video and talking about it. Um, so tell me about this philosophy video, Matt. What are we getting into here?
Okay, so I came across this philosophy tier list video by this YouTuber Snook. Shout out to you. Thank you for making this content to which we'll be reacting to. And I got a little bit into it. I can't remember how far exactly. Maybe just the introduction, or maybe a little bit in this nihilism section that we're seeing previewed here. And I was like, you know what? I think I have some thoughts about this content that he's covering, and maybe he didn't, go into everything that I was thinking. So hopefully we can add some depth and extra discussion to this tier list video that he put out. So I figured we could just go through it, pause as we need to, give our thoughts, and yeah, just kind of react in a way to this philosophy tier list video. It's like a philosophy react video. Those react videos were pretty popular years ago when I was a youngin on YouTube. So this is kind of that, but like philosophy education oriented. That's kind of what this is. Um,
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, so we're sort of like a constructive criticism and reaction to this video.
yeah. That's the aim. Um,
Awesome.
we'll see what happens. Shall I?
Yeah,
Shall we get
let's
going?
get into it.
All right.
Philosophy, something that helps provide an ethical framework for our lives, helps us ask important questions about life and death, and also helps us look for meaning and purpose in life. Now, many people
So interesting thing off the bat that I was thinking about this introduction. Uh, he seems very focused on like practical philosophy. Um, Usually, philosophy is broken down into five major categories. In a 3 to 2 split. On the theoretical side, we have metaphysics, which is the study of reality and like what there is. There's epistemology, which is theory of knowledge. How do we know things? What do we know? Is there a limit to what we can know? And there's logic, which very broad, but basically goes over the rules of proper thinking and proper argument. And then on the practical side, we have aesthetics, which is like the study of art and value and beauty. And then there's ethics, which is a lot of basically morality, you can think of it as. Um, and out of those, he really seemed in this introduction to paint philosophy as something ethical, something very practical that helps us deal with the questions of, these weren't his exact words, like right and wrong and death and important questions about life, right? So it seems very practical oriented. So I found that interesting that he chooses to focus on this, given that it's a philosophy tier list, maybe not necessarily, practical philosophy tier list, but so maybe that's worth knowing, right? We're going to be focusing on very practical philosophy, not maybe so abstract philosophy as we get into it. Did you have anything to add, Alice, to this? It's 12 seconds
Um,
so far.
yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking a similar thing. Like he's painting it as a very like narrow sort of thing, almost like it's used for exclusively this, and like this is what it is. And yeah, my interpretation of philosophy has always been a bit more broad and a bit more like it can be what you make of it. So
Yeah, for sure. But the things he says are still definitely valid. Those aren't invalid things of
absolutely,
philosophy. It
yeah,
might just
those are
be a little narrow, but so it's interesting that he's
right.
choosing to focus on these things. I'm
Yes,
curious to see what he'll out of those he will choose to talk about, and I guess
right.
rank, right. It's a tier list, so we'll get into ranking, which is also I thought it might be interesting to react to the ranking, see if we like agree or disagree. So let's get more
may
into it.
think theology or religion is the same as philosophy, but it's not exactly the same, just similar. Let me explain. Philosophy looks for rational explanations and justifications for beliefs. Philosophy has its basis in reason. Theology deals with thinking about religious beliefs in a rational manner, but it presumes faith. And also,
Oh, okay. So we just got to the clip that actually made me want to make this video. um, so in the most respectful uh, way possible. That is just not correct. His distinction between philosophy and theology, specifically with theology, I think he got it a bit wrong here. Um, how should I explain this? He says philosophy is based more on rational thinking, and faith, while it deals with philosophical topics like God, for example, deal is its foundation is faith, and I just think this is wrong. There are so many philosophically informed theologies out there, very philosophical theologians whose whole careers are dedicated to finding rational theologies and things like rational belief in God, or rational attributes of God, rational definitions of God. I mean, all this is God because it's theology, right? But I think making this separation, that maybe I'll back up, making this kind of distinction, like one, and it's funny that he put philosophy on top, theology on bottom. Maybe that's a little bias showing, one's higher than the other. I could be looking a little too into that at that point, but the main point
Yeah, I
here
wouldn't
is that
necessarily read that.
yeah, maybe not. But the main point here is definitely that I think philosophy and theology are not so distinct, at least in the way that he's making it here. I think they're very well. I know that there are very
Intertwined.
many projects based on tying in rational philosophy with theology, and it's not that merely there's some overlap in content with talk of God, like he's making it out to be. No, there are very rational theologies whose basis is philosophy and not
Right.
just faith, as he is indicating here. So that's the point I wanted to make here. Did you have anything to add or think of anything of this section as well?
No, yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Okay, cool. We can get a move on then. We were here.
Just try and give an objective opinion on them. And I'll try my best to not have any sort of my opinion in it, but that's really hard to do. So if you guys disagree with me in
That's
the
so real.
comments,
Yeah.
make sure to comment that down below, just so I can get your guys' opinion
Or make
on
a
this.
react video.
All right, now to the video. Also subscribe to the channel. It's the channel's goal to be at 250,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I think we can do it. So please subscribe. Thanks. Nihilism. Nihilism, a philosophy that is one of the more depressing on the list, but let's get into it. Nihilism, which is a philosophical stance which questions the fundamental meaning and value of existence. It suggests that
I want to say that's not exclusive to nihilism. That's kind of like most philosophy, I guess, especially the more practical philosophies that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I was
But-
also thinking like, I don't know if nihilism, I mean, to me, like, it's not necessarily like sad and depressing. I know like Buddhism can be kind of nihilist, and that's like, it's not necessarily like, oh, everything is meaningless and that's terrible. It can be like things are meaningless, but we attribute meaning. I know a lot of like positive nihilist philosophy.
Yes,
exists.
positive nihilism is definitely a school of thought that exists.
And maybe he'll get into that. I don't know.
We can
but,
see, yeah.
That was my initial.
But I just
thought, was
wanted to
like,
say that initial claim that nihilism is something that investigates the depths of life. That's kind of like a vague
Yeah,
thing that
philosophy.
actually like most philosophy does, as he was saying earlier in this video. So, but nihilism does do that as well. So it's not that's wrong. It's just again, I just want to make that clear.
life lacks inherent purpose or significance. This viewpoint challenges traditional beliefs, particularly regarding morality and the nature of reality. And there are a lot of different sides of the nihilism view, so starting off with moral nihilism, one facet of this philosophy which rejects the existence of objective moral truths. Instead, it proposes that concepts like good and evil are human constructs, rather than inherent principles of the universe.
I don't know if this is entirely correct. I don't think I know enough about this to say for sure, but I do know that there's a difference between moral relativism, which is what exactly he's talking about here, where that's the view that there are no objectively set moral values. And then actually he's getting into two separate things here. That's relativism, and then he also says that they're constructed. That's constructionism, if I want to make sure I'm getting that right, but I know there's some term out there that's like that. That's definitely, so these are also two separate things that he's describing right here that also I don't think are necessarily tied to moral nihilism.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, like maybe they are both part of moral nihilism, but these are also two separate things that you can take separately without being a moral nihilist. So I definitely want to clear that up. There's definitely more.
What is your interpretation of moral nihilism, just real quick?
Nihilism to me, just kind of, from what I know about it, which is not like, I'm no scholar on nihilism, whatever you want to pronounce it as. But when I think of it, I just think of it as like kind of an apathy, if that's the right word to use. Like just kind of like a lack of interest, a lack of care. That's just in the most general sense. That's what I think of nihilism. So now if we want to attach that to morals, maybe it's more of like moral apathy. Maybe I would describe it as that's what happens when I think of moral nihilism. And maybe a lot of maybe I don't know if a lot of maybe some moral nihilists would describe themselves this way. Maybe not so, like you were saying earlier, Alice. Maybe not so as inherently depressing. Maybe not so like sad. More of just like a disinterest almost. Just kind of like this isn't as significant.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I think what he's getting at here is something a little two things. They're different again, and that's moral relativism, as well as constructionism would apply to morality. So I think these are two separate things that he's just attaching to moral nihilism that I don't think are completely correct, at least not in my interpretation. So I guess we'll move on.
In essence, moral nihilists argue that there are no universal rules governing right and wrong, and ethical judgments are subjective or culturally determined.
Again, that's relativism combined with constructionism. I don't know if that's exactly moral nihilism.
Essential nihilism, another important aspect, delves into the ultimate meaning of human existence and the universe. It contends that life is devoid of intrinsic significance and any attempts to find meaning are ultimately futile. This perspective can make you pretty depressed or sad because it's saying nothing really matters. If someone truly believes in this philosophy of nihilism, it could lead the person to grapple with the apparent absurdity and insignificance of their lives and the vastness of the cosmos. However,
So yes, that's right in a sense. I think what he's getting at here, he's really just getting at Nietzsche. These were Nietzsche's fears when he like kind of discovered what he calls the death of God, which is the death of objective morality as a concept that's used in society, and he's noticing that people are kind of waking up to this fact that things aren't so set, things aren't binary, things are more of on a spectrum, and so and they do tend to get maybe relative as well as socially constructed, right? Not just objectively set by like God or something, which is what Snook was getting at earlier by showing those images of religious things. So yeah, I think what he's really getting at here is Nietzsche's concerns with nihilism, and it looks like there's about to be a transition to how it gets better. But I just wanted to add some of that like historical context. Like maybe it's hard to attribute this just to nihilism, right, as a whole thing, because it has developed, and it looks like he's going to get into more of the development. But I just want to point out the fact, really, what this interjection on my part is for here, is to show that this is kind of a specific historical instance of an interpretation of nihilism, and maybe not nihilism as a general concept, if that makes sense.
Right.
Did you have anything to add at this point, Alice?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
nihilism isn't purely about despair. Some proponents argue that embracing nihilism can actually be liberating. By recognizing the absence of inherent meaning, individuals are freed from the constraints of traditional values and beliefs. This liberation can inspire a more authentic mode of existence, where individuals create their own meaning and create their own values based on personal experiences and desires. Throughout history, nihilism has influenced literature, philosophy, and art.
Yeah, okay, so there he goes. He brings Nietzsche up. So he's just explaining Nietzsche at this point, which I find interesting. He doesn't really bring up beyond just like a vague image reference, along with some others. This is a Stoic here. I don't remember exactly his name. Here's Kierkegaard. I'm going to be honest, I don't know who this is. But I find it interesting yet that he still hasn't mentioned Nietzsche by name, because this is Nietzsche's specific
He's like
interpretation
pure Nietzsche,
and
yeah.
his specific solution, which is the creation of your own values. And I think it would really be helpful here to put in some like quotes from Nietzsche, as well as some like just more in-depth Nietzschean concepts, because that seems to be really just what he's driving at.
Yeah, and
So
to
it's a little vague.
specify that that's where he's taking his information from.
Exactly.
I am glad that we got some more of the positive side of nihilism, though.
Yeah, definitely. I know. Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, Alice, and I'm glad we got there too, because that is Nietzsche's solution, and he does see lots of value in. Well, actually, so this is interesting. Nietzsche. This is Nietzsche's solution to nihilism. So this isn't
Right.
really. I guess some people call it positive nihilism, but that's really not what Nietzsche was viewing it as. He was viewing it as his own solution to what
Like
at
a
his
way
time
out.
was this very depressing nihilism, this very relativistic, well, just very dangerous. Because Nietzsche's whole philosophy, and this might have been good to go into this video, so I'm glad we're able to do it here. Nietzsche's whole worry with nihilism was that society would fall apart and people would stop living their lives and stop, yeah, literally just that, living their lives to the fullest. Because that is what Nietzsche's philosophy is about: becoming
Right.
who you are, in the truest sense that you can, and really just take on life with a sense of power, which is his philosophy of the will to power, which we can get more into in another video. And nihilism was a huge threat to that, because nihilism, as Snook correctly brought up, often does lead people to become depressed at this realization that, you know, this great outside comfort of external values and God and these things are gone. So that's a big threat to living your life to the fullest. So Nietzsche's like, we need a way out of this so we can keep living on, and society doesn't fall apart. People can keep being who they are truly
Right.
out of the chains of the binary moral system and other things like that, which actually was some pretty good imagery earlier in the video. This
Yeah.
image of breaking out of the chains. So that was
The
pretty
chains,
good.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, so that was good. I just wish he brought up some more Nietzsche specifically and went into what I just talked about. I think that might have been helpful, but glad we were able
Yeah.
to cover that here. Did you have anything more to add to this part?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Albert Camus have explored its implications,
Oh,
prompting
that's Camus. Okay, cool.
deep reflections on the human condition.
I think.
While nihilism can be unsettling, I personally think it fits certain people. If someone doesn't fully align with traditional moral beliefs, it could be a decent fit, I guess. Also, it allows complete control over what you believe without having to conform to any religion or other philosophy. So, D tier.
You put
Okay.
nihilism in D tier.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. This is I guess how he's judging it. So he gives his thoughts, and then he puts it into the tier. He made it sound pretty positive, so I don't know why he put it in D tier. I guess this
For
is
me,
like a
nihilism is like at least A. Like it's
okay.
that's.
Interesting.
I mean, that was so like for me personally, like that was core to becoming interested in philosophy. Like kind of
Yeah.
like the Cartesian demon, like we talked about. It was
Yeah.
like oh shit, like it made me think more, and having to get out of that trap was like what really drew me to it.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely has lots of value. I think Nietzsche is a lot of people's first philosopher to an introduction to philosophy and kind of those
Totally.
existential worries. And yeah, I would put that definitely higher than D. I don't
Super
know exactly
important.
where yet, because like I'll have to see where these other things get placed. And
True, good point.
yeah, but definitely like high tier.
Yeah,
would,
my initial thought was like A or S.
yeah, at least for in terms of development and thought, and yeah,
Yeah.
and honestly, like breaking out of like
Conventional.
yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
like what makes up postmodern philosophy. And that's kind of what he that was a big part of him, I think, putting that in D tier based on what he just said. So by putting that there, I guess he's kind of just like pooping on that aspect of postmodern philosophy. I don't know. That's just like what I'm getting out of that. So I don't know. Maybe not a postmodern fan, which I just disagree, and I go into that all day. But yeah, for the reasons Alice and I just said, we
Having
disagree.
to conform to any religion.
Oh, we so,
Absurdism.
okay. All right. let's get into
Absurdism.
I
is-
really like absurdism.
What's that?
I really like absurdism.
Yeah, absurdism's interesting. It has a few fundamental tenets that I disagree with, but we'll see what he says about it here.
Another philosophical viewpoint that delves into the meaning of existence, but it approaches the subject differently than nihilism. Absurdism, often associated with the work
Oh,
of the
cool. Okay, good you
existentialist
brought up
philosopher
philosophy.
Albert Camus, acknowledges the apparent lack of inherent meaning in the universe, similar to nihilism. However, instead of resigning to despair or nihilistic conclusions, absurdism proposes embracing the inherent absurdity of the human condition. At the core of absurdism is the recognition of the absurd nature of existence, where humans constantly seek meaning and purpose in the universe that seems indifferent or rational. Despite this, absurdists advocate for a defiant and courageous response to this absurdity. They argue that individuals can find meaning and can find fulfillment by embracing life's uncertainties and contradictions, even in the face of an ultimately meaningless universe. Camus famously illustrated the absurd through his essay The Myth of Sisyphus in his novel The Stranger. In The Myth of Sisyphus, he likens human existence to the plight of Sisyphus, condemned to endlessly roll a boulder up a hill only to watch it roll back down, symbolizing the futility of our actions in the face of an indifferent cosmos. Despite this seemingly futile existence, Camus argues that Sisyphus can find meaning and defiance in his struggle. Also, in The Stranger, Camus explores the life of an ordinary man, Marisalt's, who faces life's absurdity with indifference and detachment. Through Marisalt's experiences, Camus highlights the absurdity of human existence and the potential for individuals to find meaning through personal rebellion against societal norms and expectations. In summary, absurdism acknowledges the lack of inherent meaning in the universe, but proposes embracing life's absurdity as a means of finding personal meaning and fulfillment compared to nihilism. It encourages individuals to confront the inherent contradictions of existence with courage and defiance, rather than succumbing to despair or nihilism. Absurdism is very interesting to me.
Okay, so it looks like he's about to get into his ranking. I just want to say that all was very good, I think. He brought up exactly the historical philosophers and the context and the core tenets of the ideas. Maybe just one little detail I want to add. A lot of that absurdity that he is talking about comes from the assumption that there's a famous line in Camus that I'm gonna butcher, but I'll paraphrase it. And it's basically that man and the world are inherently divorced, based on the world being irrational and man being rational, which I don't entirely disagree with, especially being a fan of Zizek personally, who's we're constantly confronted with irrationality and we're making rationality out of it post. In terms of being absurd, I don't agree with. That's more of just kind of my own opinions on the philosophy. But in terms of him covering it, yeah, aside from that little detail that might have been nice to throw in, he did a really good job of explaining that, and I think that's very clear. Did you have any thoughts
Yeah, I
up to this
agree.
point, Alice?
Yeah, my biggest thought is just I liked the way that he went specifically into Camus, and he stated I'm drawing this from Camus,
Yeah.
and I wish he did that with nihilism,
Yeah,
because
me
I feel
too.
like it would have been would have flowed better if he had stated that where he was taking that was Nietzsche,
Mhm.
because that would have, I guess, made it a little more in line, because he's stating the narrowness of it.
Yeah,
If you
exactly. This
you know
isn't just nihilism. This is
exactly,
Nietzschean
this is Nietzsche,
interpretation of
which is
nihilism and his
often
solution. Kind of like what he did here. This is Camus. He takes the works and he says Camus handles absurdism in this way and gives examples of the characters
exactly.
yeah, that was really good. So yeah, good job. And yeah, cool.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see where he ranks absurdism.
And probably one of my favorite philosophies to learn and live by. So I may be a little bit biased, but I think it's good to be yourself and live by your own means and just do what you want and embrace all the struggles that come with life and take every struggle as a learning lesson. So,
Which is really funny because that's so similar to nihilism.
Yeah.
Oh,
really
okay.
quite amusing.
I don't understand this specific ranking, but the points you made here, I agree. I would personally put it in A tier just because it does have some core assumptions about rationality that I think in the wake of people like Hegel and Schelling and specifically German idealism, I think they handle irrationality and contradiction in such a similarly hopeful way, but come away with a lot more helpful and rigorous and more satisfying conclusions than the absurdists do. So for that reason, I'd put it in B or A. But yeah, at least in the points that Snook brought up here, I definitely agree, and definitely should be a high ranked philosophy. It's very thorough, makes very good points as well argued, like he covered. Yeah, so I'm pretty. I'm not totally upset or anything at this ranking. Do you have any thoughts on this,
Awesome.
Alice?
Yeah, I agree. I think he handled it really well. And I like absurdism as well. I think it's cool. I like that it just kind of, yeah, embraces like the strange nature of the world we live in, and like it's funny.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
for
yeah,
sure. Definitely good at highlighting a lot of those more absurd things, especially for the practically minded. This is a big like in Camus' works. You'll just find examples of like he literally talks about just going to work and feeling tired and being like, "I'm doing this for no reason," and I think so many people can relate to that. So
that's so real.
I
Yeah,
think it's a really okay. Yeah, cool. So I'm glad this got the praise I think it deserves personally.
totally.
Even if it's a
Yeah,
little higher than I would personally rank it, I think the points made here are good, and absurdism is definitely a good
for sure.
philosophy to like read about and learn from.
Totally. Great.
Cool. So do you want to get into utilitarianism in this part or in this
Yeah,
part
let's
here?
let's do
Okay, cool. We can
utilitarianism.
tackle utilitarianism, and then we'll end that and go into part two, starting with
Right.
objectivism. All right, cool. Let's get into that.
Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is a moral and philosophical theory that suggests the best action is the one that maximizes overall happiness or well being for the greatest number of people. It's the consequentialist approach, meaning it focuses on the outcomes or consequences of actions rather than inherent principles or rules. At the heart of utilitarianism is the idea of utility, which is typically understood as happiness, pleasure, or the absence of suffering. According to this theory, the morality of an action is determined by its ability to produce the greatest amount of utility for the greatest number of people. Utilitarianism can be further divided
I like
into
the
two
art.
main branches: act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. Act utilitarianism evaluates each individual actions based on its specific consequences, choosing the action that leads to the greatest overall utility in a given situation. Rule utilitarianism, on the other hand, proposes that moral rules or principles should be followed based on their ability to produce the greatest overall utility when consistently applied.
Okay, so that's cool. Honestly, I genuinely just learned something from this video. I did not know there was a difference between the two of those, and that is actually really
Awesome.
clear and well done. And so far, LT has everything a-okay. So cool.
Oh,
Thank you. I just learned something. That's cool. Do you have
yeah.
any thoughts on
Thanks.
this so far,
Thanks.
Alice?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Cool.
One of the key
Thanks, Snook.
strengths of utilitarianism is its emphasis on promoting the well being of the majority in its practical approach to moral decision making. However, critics of utilitarianism argue that it could lead
That's
to
me.
ethical dilemmas and overlooks the rights and interests of minority groups or individuals. Overall, though, utilitarianism provides a decent framework for evaluating ethical choices based on their consequences and their impact on human happiness and well being. It continues to be a prominent theory in moral philosophy and is often applied in various fields, including ethics, politics, and economics. Utilitarianism is really hard to judge because, on one hand, you have a fun, happy life because you're just trying to maximize happiness and the complete absence of any sort of hardships or suffering. So I think this philosophy is almost impossible to live by in a sense.
Yeah, so I just want to actually point out this one detail that he touched on, but maybe a little more detail would be helpful. Um, this is utilitarianism based on like happiness and well-being he's bringing up, but these aren't the only like things you could utilitarianism in the most general sense is literally just based on utility of like whatever you can pick any like principle you
Right.
want, like utility of money, right? That's kind of
Hmm.
like what uh like late stage capitalism. I mean that's all can of beans, but that we can get into, but can of worms, but but right, that's money based utilitarianism and profit based utilitarian. So there are different things you could base utilitarianism on. He's just
Right.
emphasizing, I think, happy. I think it's called, there is like the rule of happiness or something. It's called in utilitarian theory, at least based on what I remember from my ethics class. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that little extra detail that might be helpful in broadening the what utilitarianism is a concept. Um,
Because life
let's
isn't
see
all
where he ranks
flowers
it.
and rainbows. There is bound to be hardships no matter how hard you try to avoid them, so you'll always be striving for something that you can't really reach because, let's face it, not everyone on the universe or on the face of the planet will be happy at all times. So this philosophy will never really be fulfilled because you'll always be striving for something you can't reach. So B tier. Objectivism.
Okay, interesting placement at the B tier. Um,
Yeah, I'd
yeah,
personally put it in like C or D.
yeah, I would put it lower as well. He brought up that criticism where like you never actually get what you're after, which that's
Right.
called. I think that specific criticism is called like if I remember from ethics correctly, it's called like the leaky jar criticism, because it basically says that you're trying to fill up the jar with happiness, but it's always leaking because it's never full and it empties, and you've got to like eternal cycle on. Um, that's not the most in depth explanation, but you can look up if you're interested the leaky jar criticism of utilitarianism. And yeah, personally, me being much more of like a Kantian, like Hegelian fan in terms of ethics specifically, for this, yeah, I think principle is like way higher than outcome in most cases. Um, I'm not a complete Kantian in the sense of like, I believe only rules should be followed regardless of the outcome. I think outcome does matter. This is actually Hegel's criticism of Kant's morality. That the concrete does actually matter, and ethics exists to deal with the concrete. So in that sense, yes, there is some utilitarianism there, but I think it should be heavily based on principle and shouldn't always be concerned about just generating one specific outcome like happiness, which is also just really hard to define in general. I think it's much easier to stick to moral. Well, not easier. I think it's more correct for reasons I can go into in other videos to stick to moral principles that are consistent with reason and other things. The whole, if you're into more of what I'm into, you can look up Kantian ethics, categorical imperative, as well as just Hegel's ethics. So that's my take on that, and because of that, I would rank utilitarianism pretty lowly. Do you have more in-depth takes on this, Alice?
No, I'm good.
All right. So that is part one, right? You're cool with
Yes.
cutting it here.
Yeah, let's.
We'll pick up with part two, probably touching objectivism, determinism, maybe rationalism. Maybe that'll be part three. I don't know. We'll see though.
Yes.
But yeah, do you want to do a little outro thing, Alice, or I don't know? I can do one.
Sorry, do you want to actually do? I didn't realize there was one more that's short, because it looks like after one more we'd be at about the halfway point.
Okay, yeah. So you just wanted? I was thinking in terms of
Yeah.
three, but if you just want to do part one and two, we can.
I think that would make the most sense.
Okay,
Just like
cool.
at where we're at.
Yeah, that's
Where we're
fine.
at now.
Okay, so you can have this part out, and we'll just go into objectivism.
Yes.
All right, cool. So going into objectivism, following that, it was B tier. Yeah, B tier placement of utilitarianism, which we had a little bit of a qualm with, but I think he covered it well.
Yes,
So
I
we'll do
agree.
objectivism.
Objectivism, which is a philosophical system developed by writer and philosopher Ayn Rand, advocates for a belief in objective reality, reason, and individualism. At its core, objectivism holds that reality exists independent of human consciousness. It asserts that facts are facts, regardless of an individual's beliefs or wishes. In other words, reality is what it is, and our perceptions must conform to it. Objectivism emphasizes the importance of reason as the primary means of understanding reality and making decisions. Rational thinking, logic, and evidence are seen as essential tools for achieving knowledge and guiding human action. Another key principle of objectivism is the promotion of rational self-interest as a moral virtue. It argues that individuals have the right to pursue their own happiness and well-being, and that self-interest is not inherently selfish or immoral, but rather a natural expression of human nature. Objectivism also upholds the sovereignty of the individual and rejects collectivism. It emphasizes the importance of individual rights, including the rights to life, liberty, and property, and advocates for a society based on voluntary cooperation and free exchange. Moreover, objectivism advocates for a laissez-faire capitalism as the ideal socio-economic system. It argues that a free market, where individuals are free to pursue their own goals and trade with others on a voluntary basis, is the most just and efficient way to organize society. In summary, objectivism presents a comprehensive worldview that encompasses metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics, so some pretty important fields it is a big part of. While it has garnered both praise and criticism, objectivism continues to influence debates in philosophy, politics, and culture. Objectivism is a really interesting philosophy.
Yeah, so we covered that pretty well. This is funny. I don't know a lot about objectivism, but like from what little I do know, plus what he described, which is matches everything I know. So, not an expert, but in my view, pretty a-okay. But yeah, this is kind of like the Ben Shapiro philosophy. Like most of Ben Shapiro's like takes about like facts triumphing feelings and laissez-faire capitalism. Yeah, if you want a modern day objectivist, I would say look towards Ben Shapiro, and I'm sure we all have opinions about that, so I'll leave that there, but I think that's fair to say. Let's see what Snook's takes are.
To look into and think about, because unlike a lot on this list and what we will cover, objectivism just focuses kind of on the real world and yourself, nothing otherworldly or about life or death. I think that objectivism is an inherently good philosophy. It advocates for freedom, which I argue is always good no matter what, but it does mainly focus on just yourself, which can be seen as selfish, but it's really up to you. So, A tier.
Whoa!
Wow.
Okay, finishing off part one with a pretty wild take here by Snook, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of objectivism. I mean, aside from its political things, which I was hinting at earlier, on a more like metaphysical side of things and epistemological side of things, which Snook brought up as well, that objectivism covers. Kind of, from what I understand, it kind of just takes like the quote unquote real world as like a granted thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read like any bit of Hegel's on this, you will find that very quickly falls apart as what he calls as an indeterminate notion, just because there are so many assumptions loaded behind it. Like, what is the real world? Like, what do you mean by that? And as soon as you start asking these questions, as like Hegel points out, for example, largely in his Phenomenology of Spirit, the sense certainty section I recommend reading on this is a really good just kind of critique on this kind of things where it says, okay, let's just do the real world and let's take freedom and let's just take these vague notions, at least Hegel calls them, and just apply them and say, yes, this is how philosophy works. To me, that's kind of not philosophy at all. That's taking assumptions and going with them and just saying, yes, this is how things should work. Granted, I have not read Ayn Rand personally, but I'm going off of what has just been said in the video, and what Snook said. Like, Snook is like, okay, freedom is always a good thing, and dealing with what do you say, the real world or common sense, is a good thing, and like, but okay, like, what is that, like, what is the real world? Define that, and soon you will find you'll run into a myriad of troubles and disagreements and different interpretations. So because it's so vague and just in a Hegelian way indeterminate, I would rank this as genuinely the worst philosophy on this list. Also with its political implications, which I could go on for 10 years about why I also disagree with, but I'll spare you all that. If you've heard the thinkers I brought up, like Hegel, Kant, you can probably already see why I disagree with it politically as well. So I'll leave that there as and to keep this somewhat brief. Alice, do you want to go into any of your things?
So I mean, I agree with what you said, and I also just I don't think objectivity is really achievable. I don't think that's a useful concept, especially in a philosophical context, a lot of the time anyway. And honestly, my biggest issue with this is just kind of like the statement of calling something an inherently good philosophy. I think is a really loaded
Yeah,
phrase.
exactly.
Calling
Loaded. Yeah.
anything inherently good, I just like take issue with that. I don't think it's really like a
Which is
that's
interesting
a
too, because Snook earlier was like, "Oh, absurdism is great. Absurdism doesn't think anything like is inherently. If the only inherent attribute anything has is absurdity in absurdism. So aside from
right.
humans that are inherently rational. So, but I guess maybe that's what he's going at. Maybe in some like absurdist way. But I don't think the absurdist rationality would. I don't think that meshes with what Ayn Rand and objectivism, right? That's what this is called. Yeah, I don't think the objectivism rationality and absurdist rationality are the same at all. And yeah, wow, that's a that's an interesting take. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
cut you off. I just you
No, all
brought that
good.
up, and I thought that was going to go into. Do you have any other
Yeah.
thoughts? Um,
Well, I think this is the end of part one, right?
yeah, yeah, cool. I just didn't
So,
didn't want to
yeah,
cut you
I
short
do want to
there.
say like I really appreciate this video essay. I think it's very well done in a lot of ways. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
visuals are great. It's good art. He clearly put a lot of time and effort in, and I appreciate the spreading of like just general like philosophical thought. But I do think nihilism had some things I disagreed with, and I don't agree with his placement of objectivism. And yeah, but I definitely want to say like, and also the intro was a bit problematic in my opinion as well, um, and kind of narrow and sort of like taking this really broad thing and kind of saying like, well, this is the definition. Um,
Yeah,
but with that said, I appreciate the video. I appreciate the work and the thought behind it.
yeah, me too. I agree. With pretty much everything you said there. One thing I want to do before ending this part, I want to see if we can find oh, here we go. Good, a frame of the tier list. And I don't know. Do you have an order of these that you would prefer these in?
I would probably put nihilism in S, absurdism in A. Um, what was the third? Determinism or
We didn't get to different. So there's absurdism, uh, objectivism, utilitarianism, and nihilism.
utilitarianism? Not the term. Yeah, utilitarianism probably like B or C, like probably C. Um,
Hmm.
and then objectivism probably D for me.
Gotcha. Cool.
How about you?
Yeah. Personally, I'm thinking I would put. Hmm. First of all, I think we did an F tier. To be honest, that would make this a little easier. But working within
Yeah,
this framework, I think objectivism is going in D. Start out with the easy one. Utilitarianism in C. Uh, absurdism in B. Nihilism in A. That's what I would do. And I just put nihilism above absurdism because it is more general, allows for less assumptions, and absurdism, at least in the way that was presented here, which is Camus' absurdism, that comes with some just assumptions that I'm definitely not in agreement with.
yeah,
And nihilism is a bit more broad and has though a lot of similar positive outcomes philosophically and existentially. So yeah, I would. I don't think I'd put anything in S yet. Nothing's maybe in part two I'll rework it and see what we work with. But so far nothing's for me in S. Kind of yeah, objectivism D, utilitarianism C, absurdism B, nihilism A. That's my ranking.
cool.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for watching us in part one. Do you have anything
Yes.
a little outro or anything, Alice? Little closer.
Yeah, thanks so much if you stuck around this long. Hope you enjoyed. Snook, if you're watching, which hopefully you will, that'd be
That
cool.
would be cool. Maybe we can
Um,
talk about this or something.
yeah, open debate, like
Yeah, I'm
come hang
down.
out, like talk, learn. We can learn from you, you can learn from us. Exchange of information and ideas, which is what philosophy is all about to me anyway.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, thanks for making this video, and I really enjoyed watching and reviewing it.
Yeah. Uh, awesome. I agree with everything Alice just said. And cool. I'm glad we're able to focus on something that has another thing that made me want to make this video is it has lots of views as well. And this is
Totally.
very influential. So I think hopefully maybe our take on this can also, I mean, probably this influential, but you know, hopefully we can get our thoughts out there and they'll be valued to somebody. So yes, thank you for
Yeah.
watching up to this point. If you have, this has been part 1, and so we'll see you in part 2 for the other rough half of this video. Yeah.
Yes.
So excited. Thank you, and we'll see you then.